All right, now we are going to be looking at blood vessels. So when you're looking at page 51, this is part 2 of the activity 4/5. And in your lab manual on page 51, we are going to be talking about those blood vessels, and the pages in the text, or I'm sorry, in the lab manual that correspond to this are pages 85 to 90. And what I will do is also pull these up in Van Greiner, but 85 to 90 follows the same format that's right there on page 51. Okay, so page 85 to 90 follows page 51. And then again, we're going to be looking over the kitty cat vessels, and we'll download that presentation, and then we open it. Actually, do this, go to animations, or I'm sorry, slideshow. Okay, so we want to look at the superior thoracic arm and arteries. So when we are looking at that, our page 51 is asking us to identify the arch of the aorta, the thoracic aorta, the brachiocephalic aorta, both the right and the left subclavian arteries, as well as right and left common carotid arteries, the axillary, the axillary artery, as well as brachial artery. So remember, one piece of advice that I have for you is to get out your colored pencils and to use red on arteries. So I would highlight the word arteries right there where it says superior thoracic arm arteries. I would highlight the arteries in red. Under inferior abdominal arteries, I would highlight those arteries red. I would highlight the word arteries red, as well as under thigh vessels where it says femoral artery, I would also highlight that red. Now with a blue colored pencil, what I recommend is that you take that blue colored pencil and under superior thoracic arm veins, color in the word veins, highlight it, whatever, box it. Same thing with inferior abdominal veins, highlight that in blue. And then under thigh vessels where it says femoral vein, I would also highlight that blue. Now, in your textbook, I'm sorry, I keep saying textbook, but what I am referring to is your lab manual. So on page 85 of the lab manual is the same image. Okay, so it's asking you to identify one as the arch of the aorta. So I like to tell students that think about a lot of the vasculature of our body as Cedar Point, and we are on a red blood cell traveling through our body. So if you think of the arch of the aorta, it's going up, right? So you think about going on a roller coaster. And what's happening is you're going up, 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 up. And then that is referred to as ascending, and then you have your arch, which is at the very tip top before you go down, the descending, okay? So it's asking you to identify the arch of the aorta. So we see that clearly marked in number 1. Number 2 is the brachiocephalic artery. So we can see that stemming off of the aorta, specifically the arch of the aorta. And then number 3, it's asking us to identify our left subclavian artery. Now recall, I mentioned this a few times already, that you have to notate the difference between right and left when we're talking about things being in anatomical position. So remember, it's opposite to us. So number 3 is left subclavian artery, whereas number 4 is right subclavian artery, okay? And then we see number 5 is showing us the difference between right and left common carotid arteries. Number 6 is the left axial artery. Number 7 is the left brachial artery. And then 8 is the thoracic aorta, okay? Next up, we have on page 51, it's telling us now to look at the superior thoracic and arm veins, which is on page 86. And it's on page 86 of your lab manual. So when we go to the next slide, okay, so thoracic, superior thoracic and arm veins. So now these are going to be, notate the difference between the previous slide being we were pointing out structures that were mostly red, and now we are pointing out structures that are blue. So what has happened is that these vasculature structures have been injected with a plastinized color, okay, so either red or blue coloring that's been plastinated so that they take up the lumen of the vessel so that we could see them better. Okay, so here, number 1 is asking us to identify the superior vena cava. So we know that the superior vena cava, superior meaning above, and vena cava is referring to that big structure that is above the heart, vena cava. Number 2 is asking us to identify both the right and left brachiocephalic veins. Number 3 is asking us to identify both the right and left subclavian veins. When we look at number 4, 4 is asking us to identify both the right and left axillary veins. Number 5 is pointing out the left brachial vein, whereas number 6 is pointing out right and left external jugular veins. And then number 7, you can see, is more internal compared to number 6, which is more external. So number 7 is the left internal jugular vein. And then it's just telling you the right internal jugular vein is not shown, and it might be because somebody pulled it off during dissection, or I mean, it's kind of hard to say, but anyhow, number 8 is showing us the inferior vena cava, and you can see that in the smaller picture off to the left, right above the diaphragm. Okay, so that's the inferior vena cava. So that's on the bottom, or the most inferior portion of the heart, so to speak. okay? So that covers the superior thoracic arm veins. The next image that we are going to look at, following sequence, is the inferior abdominal arteries. So again, if we're looking at page 51 corresponds with page 88. So if you flip over to page, let's see, page 88, inferior abdominal veins, it's showing us the same thing. Number one is the abdominal aorta. So we can see that it is in the abdominal pelvic cavity. So it is below the thoracic aorta, because remember the thoracic aorta is going to be right above the abdominal pelvic cavity. And then number two is asking us to identify the celiac trunk artery, okay? So that is going to end up feeding a variety of things, but mainly it's going to be feeding like our hepatic portal circulation. So things that involve the GI, so liver. It's going to be helping with the spleen and with the pancreas and with the stomach and so on and so forth. So that is the celiac trunk artery. Then number three is asking us to identify the superior mesenteric artery. Number four is feeding the renal artery, so renal referring to kidney, okay? So that's the renal artery. And then number five is the inferior mesenteric artery. So you have the superior, number three, and number five is inferior mesenteric artery. And then you have 6 and 7, and 6 and 7, it's the difference between it being an external versus an internal artery. So number 6 is your external iliac artery, and number 7 is your internal iliac artery. So remember the differences in spelling. Iliac, this iliac is referring to a location, and so the location of this is near the iliac bone. So that's why it is spelled I-L-I instead of I-L-E, okay? And we are not going to be looking at that artery, but at any rate, so external iliac vein and internal iliac vein. So next up, we have on page 89, is covering the inferior abdominal arteries, okay? So what we see here is pillow. Go to your pillow. Pillow. So in this image on page 89, we are being asked to identify, number one, the thoracic aorta. So this is, again, remember, above our abdominal aorta. And remember, it sort of is the difference of separation between the diaphragm. What is above is thoracic and what is below is abdominal. And then number three is asking us to identify the celiac trunk, okay? And then off of that, we have these branches, okay? So what branches off of the celiac trunk? We have the hepatic artery, the left gastric artery, and the splenic artery. So A, B, and C. A is hepatic, B is left gastric artery, and C is splenic artery. Then from there, we have the superior mesenteric artery, and then number 5 is the renal artery. And again, you can see that's going straight toward the, straight into the kidney. And then we have the vessels of the abdominal area and leg area. So we are going to be looking at page 90 for inferior abdominal veins as well as the thigh vessels. All right, so looking on page 90 to correspond, it's asking us to identify number 1 is the inferior vena cava. Number 2 is the renal vein, which you can see up there at the top, going directly into the kidney. Then number 3 is the common iliac vein. Then number 4 is the external. Number 4 and 5 it's the difference between the external and internal iliac vein. So you can see that close-up image is showing you the internal iliac veins. Okay, they're the smaller, more delicate looking ones. And then number 6, now pay attention here, number 6 is the femoral artery, but number 7 is the femoral vein. So is the femoral artery going to be red or blue? Hopefully your answer was red. Femoral arteries, remember arteries are red and veins are blue. So number 7 is the femoral vein and that should be blue. So that is what we are looking at for those blood vessels. Now what I would like for you to look at next is page 52 of your lab manual. And I want you to understand that page 52 is going to correspond, okay, so page 52, it carries over onto page 53 and page 54, okay? But each one of these 11 circulatory system pathways has a corresponding set of images that go along with it. So if you look at page 55, it says arm pathway, and then it gives you, page 55 says arteries, so it's written in red, and then page 56 is arm pathway, and it says veins, but it's written in blue. So if any of you have issues with color blindness, make sure that you are reading and understand the difference between those, because it's going to be that way for all of these 11 different circulatory pathways. So you're going to see one for arm, one for head, one for brain, so on and so forth. So the corresponding pages to page 52, 53, and 54 are 55 through 84, okay? We are not going to go into those today. We are going to save those for next week. But the homework that I have for you, that I would like for you to report back to me next week, is what do all 11 of these pathways have in common? Okay? Think about that, and I want you to review these pages before we meet next week, and I want you to send me an email, okay, stating what each of these 11 pathways have in common, okay? A hint is pay attention to the structure and the order of each, okay? So your homework for next week is to send me an email of what pathways, out of what do all of these 11 pathways have in common. Okay, so let me pull that up. Remember again, you go to Van Greiner, and then you're going to go to, we've already done the cat organs, we've done the vasculature, the vessels, and now we are going to look at the pathways. So let's open that pathways. Let me close this one. And then also what I wanted to point out, let me start this slideshow really quick. Okay, I want to what I'm waiting for to upload is something where I can show you. I do not want to do it that way. Give me a moment. I don't know why this is giving me a hard time, but anyhow, this slideshow, this PowerPoint that I have is also on our course, our Blackboard site. So what I would like for you to do is go to, hold on, let me open this. No, that's not what I want. Okay. Anyhow, it doesn't look like it's gonna allow me to do this, but at any rate, this is on our Blackboard site right now, and this is another way for you to practice identifying and quizzing yourself. And it's all there. This is sort of what you would expect during our exam. This is like a way to test yourself. You can also do it through Van Greiner as well. And then let me shrink that down and then show you the pathways. Okay, so for example, we have, this is how, I want you to go ahead and look at this before you come to class. And so what I want you to notate here is, you can see up here there's arteries. And then for example, the next one is, so this is the head pathway for the arteries, and then we have the head pathway for the veins. So you need to be able to notate during the exam the order that the blood is flowing through for that particular pathway. And we'll talk more about that next week, but I want you to look it over because it's a very intense exam, okay? And out of those 11 pathways, you don't know which one you're going to get. It's going to be randomized, okay? So nobody knows what they're going to get. So that's why it's very important for you to know all 11 of them and be able to regurgitate them without a word bank, okay? So make sure that you review that, look over that, and we will talk again about this on our next class meeting next Friday. And so don't forget that homework. And what was the other thing that I was going to also tell you? So remember, we have this class period this Friday and next Friday's class period, and then it's the exam over these things that we've covered from today and next week. Okay, so in order for you to be very prepared for this exam, you have to review this material, okay? So reach out to me if you have any questions. Otherwise, we will tune back in next week. Take care.